Hello gamers, and welcome back to another episode of our F1 2020 Driver Career Mode, episode number 12 today for the Canadian Grand Prix. If you missed our previous video in Azerbaijan, it's your choice if you want to check it out. It was a real hero to zero story, going from our first pole position of the year to quite frankly a dismal race. But we're going to put all that aside as we focus on our first home Grand Prix at the Canadian Grand Prix, which should be a lot of fun. In terms of upgrades, we don't have much, but we're going to invest in a minor tire wear upgrade, which should be ready for the French Grand Prix on our next race. But with no upgrades heading into this weekend, we're just going to advance to Canada. And to add to the pressure, we find out it's going to be a wet race. And a full wet race. So contrary to intermediate conditions that we faced so far this season, there is heavy rain for the entire session. So there's going to be a lot of damage control, whether we go for a dry setup for qualifying, because qualifying is going to be dry conditions. Do we just ford it through, get a good position, and damage control for the rest of the race? Or do we go for a wet setup because we know it's going to be wet during the race and just kind of damage control during qualifying? That's kind of what we're facing here. But after practice one, we do set good pace. But again, this was on the dry compound, so this ultimately means nothing. But what's also strange is that the two Red Bulls of Verstappen and Albon are out of the top 10 in practice one. So again, the Red Bull's not showing much pace. I mean, Verstappen had an engine failure last race, but he should have gotten a fresh engine at this point. So the pace is very, very weird. And again, he's only in P7 at the end of practice 2. We're in P9, but that's because we're not running race setup or quali pace runs. But at the end of P3 in intermediate conditions, thankfully, we're at the top. So that means that we are looking good in wet conditions, but ultimately, again, intermediate and wet conditions are two entirely different things, and you'll see once we get into the race. But Albon, way down in the order, in P15, which is very weird, and Gio's where Gio's going to be at the bottom. But anyway, let's just head into qualifying. And here we are into qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix, and I decided to go for a wet setup. You know, just damage control during qualifying, and then we'll see where you are for the race. And I'll leave a link to the dry setup that I ran in Canada in the description below, as well as a video that helps to convert your dry setups to wet setups, which really helped me in this race. But anyway, the extra downforce we put on because of the wet setup actually really helps us. We carry more speed into the corners. As you can see, we get very close to the wall of champions, but across the line, we end up in P2 after our first run. So we still have quite a lot of pace despite having a setup that's meant for wet conditions. However, we do drop to P6. So we decide to, we go out again. And we make up quite a bit of time, but as we navigate the hairpin of turn 10 at the circuit Gio Villeneuve, we miss the apex by quite a bit, and we lose about 0.2 of a second going through that corner. But thankfully, we regain that time, passing by the wall of champions again, down the start-finish straight, across the line, into P3 behind the Mercedes. So if we can keep this pace up for the rest of the session, we're looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. Albon actually does very well in qualifying in comparison to his teammate Max Verstappen. The man who in 2020 demolished his teammate in qualifying is down in P9. Quite interesting. Leclerc as well, a driver who usually outqualifies his teammate Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, not looking very good from him, but Gio out of P16, which is actually, to be fair, close to Q2, but not good enough. But anyway, here we are in our first lap of Q2, and we're just going to show the full lap because I believe this was our fastest lap. So here we go, around the high speed, the medium speed chicane of turns 1 and 2, heading into another chicanes of turn 3 and 4, into the kink of turn 5, heading towards another chicane of turn 6 and 7. So Canada has quite a lot of chicanes, which as a result do tend to it does tend to mean that we do have plenty of good spots to overtake on, which is good for us. Heavy braking zone into turn 8 and 9, thanks to the help of the DRS, heading towards a hairpin of turn 10. Very important that we get a good run into this corner as we brake a little earlier so that we can hit the apex this time. And we're stuck behind Verstappen, so we'll get quite a good slipstream heading down the long back straight at Canada, with assisted also the DRS, However, the DRS really means nothing if you navigate the kink of turn 12, because during a wet race there won't be DRS. So it's just going to be old school racing, braking hard for the last chicane of turns 13, 14, past the wall of champions. Make sure we don't break our front wing against that. And here we are across the line, and it's P1. So a very, very good lap from us. And, well, we kind of stay in P1 again, but we go it again, just to, test our pace, see whether or not this was a fluke or not. But we get caught behind the Renault of Daniel Ricciardo, which is really unfortunate. And he's been showing zero pace this weekend. So we lose almost a 4/10 of a second just through the first few corners, and so we just abandoned the lap at that point. But we still finish in P1, which is ridiculous to think of as well. To look down the order, Albon's in P9. Verstappen's knocked out. Wow, so that Red Bull really, something's wrong with that Red Bull. They're showing zero pace. That's not representative. To give sort of visual, Kevin Magnussen, the Haas, a car that's arguably worse than the Red Bull, is just a place behind him. So they really screwed up there. But anyway, start of Q3, we put up a really good lap. No mistakes, really. And again, P1. So, are we looking at back-to-back pole positions in an Alfa Romeo? That would be spectacular. But heading towards the end of the session again, we make up quite a bit of time into turn 2, which is good for us because, we want to solidify this position ahead of Hamilton. Hamilton, of course, being a great qualifier, both in real life and in the game. But we set a purple first sector as we navigate the chicane of turns 8 and 9, heading down the long back straight with the DRS. And we make up about 1/2 of a second, so we're not going to improve that much. But qualifying over through the final chicane of turns 13 and 14, heading towards the line. And as we approach with the DRS, Hamilton takes pole from us, and we cross the line. We do make up time. Is it enough? It is! Stupendously, we get pole position again, but this time it's even more special at our home Grand Prix. And as you can see, the tenth of a difference we made in our second lap was enough to get us that pole position. So we're once again in a very familiar situation, and we outqualify. And Lance Stroll, our Canadian our counterpart, is in P4. So we're looking at a really good race. And hopefully things look that way. But like I said, rain will throw things into flux as we beat Danny Kvyat in our rivalry. So let's carry this good luck into the race.
We're back once again beside the St. Lawrence River here in Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix. The event first moved to a variant of this track back in 1978. It was won by none other than Gilles Villeneuve, the first Canadian to ever win his home race, and in whose honour the circuit would be renamed. It's a tricky circuit to tackle in wet conditions, with top speed still of critical importance down the long back straight. There are 2.7 miles and 14 corners overall on a circuit that in the dry can see average lap speeds of around 130 miles per hour. We'll be lucky to get anywhere near that today. Alongside me to discuss all the action today is Anthony Davidson. Thanks for joining us, Ant. And tell me, you were down in the pit lane earlier. How do you think the track conditions are today?
Well, it's looking a bit cold out there, if I'm honest. These tyres have quite a narrow operating window in terms of the temperatures they need to extract the best grip. So with a cold track surface, it's going to be harder to keep those temperatures up, which will lead to lower grip and maybe more mistakes.
With the race minutes away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. Skip lines up on pole position, and it's Lewis Hamilton alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Bottas, Stroll, Charles Leclerc and Vettel, Albon, Perez, Sainz and Esteban Ocon, Verstappen, Magnussen, Lando Norris and Ricciardo, Grosjean, Giovinazzi, Daniel Kvyat and Pierre Gasly. Latifi and George Russell ends our grid lineup. And with lights out just moments away, it's time to go down to the track.
Okay, I know it's your home Grand Prix, but treat it like any other race. Don't take unnecessary risks.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jeff. First off, yes, it's our home Grand Prix, but also this isn't like any other race. As you can see, the rain is coming down hard, which means we'll pretty much do a one-stop to another set of wet tires, which means that we could get jumped here. But anyway, here we go. The 5 red lights on a very wet Canadian Grand Prix. It's lights out, and away we go as we set the ERS up. But we have to quickly counter steer as the wheel spin forces us almost right into the path of Valtteri Bottas. But we lead into the first corner of the first chicane and into the second corner. Hamilton very close behind. Sorry, I meant Hamilton. I almost ran into Hamilton. I was confusing my races because last race Bottas was on the front row with us. But here we go. We're leading the Canadian Grand Prix, and it's very wet conditions. But as you can see how treacherous this is, you can see just how slowly we're taking it into the corners, because right now there is no line on the track. It's all wet. We're forging that line with our tires at this moment. So we're going very slowly. You can see as I'm constantly jerking the steering wheel in the direction I'm going to keep the car pointing in that direction to avoid wheel spin, being very delicate on the power. But if you put it into ERS, we're growing that gap to Hamilton. But here's the replay of the start. Look, you can see the wheel spin. We try to cut Hamilton off. We go at such a sharp angle. I was worried we were going to run into him because that Mercedes could be very quick off the line. But look at how treacherous that is. Look at all that spray. That's just lowering the visibility. So being first is good for us, but we lose that advantage because we're basically forming the racing line right now. Because the more we go along this racing line during the race, the drier the track will be. But look at how treacherous it is. You can see just how carefully, gingerly I'm going. You can hear how I'm going on and off the power, feathering the throttle to ensure that I do not spin out or do anything foolish. And this is the turn that could really ruin us, the hairpin, as we brake very early, going down into first gear and gingerly navigating the apex around turn 10 and the kink of turn 11. But thankfully, on the main straight, we go ballsy. We go into rich mix and put on the ERS, because DRS is deactivated for this entire race because it's dangerous to run the drag reduction system in the rain because you need all the grip you can get. But we set our fastest lap, and we've already put up about a second of a gap between us and Hamilton. So this is looking very promising. And additionally, we're really making these tires work, I say, as we screw up the chicane of turns 8 and 9. But overall, things are looking pretty good for us. We set a purple first sector, green second sector on our second lap. So our tires, we're doing very well at managing our tires right now, and all the while as we set good times, we're extending that gap to Hamilton. Now it's almost a 2-second gap at the end of lap 2. Heading on to lap 3, we set another fastest lap, and we do it again at the end of the 4th lap, and that gap now is extended almost a second a lap. So this is stupendous work from us. However, at the end of lap 5, we get a little too greedy on the brakes there. Brake a little too late, and we carry too much speed. We're just sliding into turn 10. But crossing the line on lap 7, we set another fastest lap. So this is very interesting. And here, well, I'll be quite honest. While I thought this could be like, Canada 2011 when it was raining like crazy, it doesn't seem to be that way at this race, because no one's really making many overtakes, and there's a huge gap. So I'm going to show you this full lap, and I'm going to show you a new technique I've learned. It's pretty, if you played the game, you know this technique, but I only really started using it around this race. So as you can see, do these medium speed corners. I'm leaving it in standard, but you can change the fuel mix depending on the corner you're going through. So on a high speed straight like this, normally I put it into rich mix because you want to carry a lot of speed down the straight. But when you get into corners such as the chicane of turns 8 and 9, I kept it in standard because you want to keep you want to be able to control the car to these corners. And as we approach the hairpin, you can see I go down to lean because this is a very low speed corner, and you don't want to be carrying a lot of revs into that. So it's a great way to save fuel because you're braking and you're not carrying that much speed, which allows you to open the ERS and the rich mix down long straights such as this. So it's all about fuel conserving. The fuel mixtures that you will use throughout this race, you have to use it gingerly. Here we go down into lean because we've been in rich for a long time, and because the chicane, treacherous in dry, even more treacherous in the rain, and we save fuel. We go into standard along the start-finish straight because we know that the chicane of 1 and 2 is coming up. So as you can see, it's all about fuel management, and this technique is something I'll be using from now till the rest of this throughout the season, even throughout the new games that will be coming out. We set a purple third sector on lap 11, and as you can see, I'm kind of struggling to come up with commentary at this point, because at this point the race has become very processional, which is weird because usually in wet races, that's a great equalizer. It tends to cause drivers to really promote overtaking among cars that shouldn't be this high up. But as you can see, the top 5 haven't shifted position, and there's quite a large gap in between everyone. There's almost at least a 15 second gap between us and Hamilton in the Mercedes. So by the time we get to lap 17 in our pit window, we're still in the lead. So could we not only take our first win, but also get a win in a wet race? We'll have to see. But right now, as we enter the pits for our pit stop, Hamilton is too close to us. So if he doesn't pit, he's going to take the lead. But we could get the undercut on Hamilton as our pit crew. A little slow in the tire change, but Hamilton pits. Why has Mercedes done that? I get he's the lead car, but they could have easily gone on a lap further and taken the lead from us and made it more difficult. Especially, but because Hamilton pit now, Bottas is now the car that will inherit second place, but he's over 25 seconds behind us, which if you're 25 seconds ahead of the car behind you, then you basically get a free pit stop and you don't lose your position. So Mercedes have really bottled that. Hamilton comes back into the race in P3. So really, that pit stop isn't going to change the order at all, and we're going to be very fast on these tires. As you can see, we set 2 purple sectors on the new compound, and Bottas is pitting now. So Hamilton will inherit the position, and to make matters worse, 4th and 5th, Stroll and Leclerc will also pit. So basically, we go through a round of pit stops, and the order is still the same. Here we are, into turn 10. It's so wet that we're not able to hit the apex as we brake a little too late. You have to remember, in wet conditions, you have to be very careful. I say as I set a fastest lap again, and now we're into lap 21 of this race. Here we go, navigating into turns 6 and 7. We carry way too much speed into 6, and we slide along the track onto the wet portion, but thankfully, I'm able to put it back onto the dry line. Lap 23, fastest lap again. So I was hoping this would be more exciting, but it's very boring. And here we are on lap 23, and we're approaching the back markers. So, if you remember 2 races ago, we were being lapped at Monaco. And now, we're lapping other cars in an Alfa Romeo, a car that should be getting lapped by cars like the Mercedes. But now we're passing our fellow Canadian, Nicholas Latifi, who, in comparison to us, is having a dismal race in the Williams. He lets us go, and, well, I mean, I guess that's an overtake. Yeah, I guess. And now, on lap 25, Russell and Giovinazzi, our teammate, are now ahead of us. So Russell pulls off at the exact same spot as Nicholas Latifi. So he passed him, and now we're going to lap our teammate. So this is just embarrassing for Giovinazzi, who not only got eliminated out of Q1, but is about to get lapped by us. So he goes, wow, the team really made him go off there around turn 6 and 7. That was a terrible place to go because how wet that part of the track is, but thankfully it wasn't going very fast anyways. And now we're lapping Kvyat, our old rival. As you remember, we beat him in our rivalry, so that rivalry is over. We're going to have to choose a new rival after this race. But we lapped Kvyat, so to add insult to injury, we're just demolishing this race. Now we see past the other AlphaTauri, a Pierre Gasly at lap 27. So you know this is kind of a boring race when the only overtakes that are taking place is when we pass lapped cars as we mess up the chicane of turns 13 and 14. But that's besides the point. Into the hairpin, we carry way too much speed again, but we managed to get it back on the dry line, and now Grosjean and the Haas is ahead of us. Wish he was still in F1. Thankfully he's getting the Mercedes test, so that's good. Can you tell I'm stalling for time? Here we are, lap 31. There's 4 laps left in this race, and we're still in the lead. We've developed almost a 30-second gap to Hamilton behind us. This is amazing. And as you can see, I'm down in lean because I'm going to try and power through, and just for fun, like I'm just trolling at this point. But Danny Kvyat's out of the session, and oh, you can hear as he navigates turns 6 and 7 how there's an ugly noise coming from his engine.
Suck 9, Danny. Suck 9.
So that's a not very happy Danny Kvyat right there. But, oh, that's weird. He's not pulling over. And it's not his fault. Like, well, he just passed a place to pull over naturally as he navigates turns 8 and 9 in a slow car in the wet. This is very dangerous. Whoa! Wow. Giovinazzi, our teammate, almost ran right into Kvyat. As you can see from his T-cam, the spray, you don't see him until it's too late. So that could have been disastrous.
Oh, what the f*** they're doing, honestly.
Yeah, that's dangerous. And as we go through the lap on our rich mix lap, because we're just fooling around at this point, Kvyat's pulled over at a very dangerous spot on the road. So, we've had a few instances where the safety car should have been called out, but this time it's not. Why isn't it? Like in a wet race, especially like this, when someone pulls over, you would think you'd want to. So you lap Daniel Ricciardo now, a man who has shown dismal pace around this track. But here we are, heading towards a penultimate lap. 39 seconds ahead of Hamilton. This is it, boys. I think I'm going to do it. After two dismal races, one where we should have arguably won, if not been on the podium, it looks like we're going to win our home Grand Prix in the wettest conditions possible. These are like monsoon level amounts of rain that hasn't stopped this race. As we lap Kevin Magnussen now, we've lapped almost half the grid in this Masterclass. And on the last lap, as we head into the chicane, we're 42 seconds ahead of Hamilton. We've done it, boys. After trials and tribulations, as we navigate our pit wall to celebrate with our team, we crossed the line first in our home Grand Prix in the wet. What a stupendous result.
Everything we wanted today.
A victory for Alfa Romeo. The team will certainly be celebrating tonight. What do you think it was, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition today?
Well, they clearly have a car that comes alive in the kind of conditions we were dealing with today. It's a very balanced package in the wet, and what that means is that the drivers have confidence to attack. Having that confidence, power earlier, it lets you brake later, and can put you a long way up the road.
Looks like they're on their way out to the podium now. Oh, what a result this is! And a popular one with the crowd as well. Great stuff to see the Alfa Romeo team on top here today.
What a stupendous result. But a quite boring race in retrospect. As you can see, through the top 10, no one changes their positions. The only one who changed their position is Verstappen, passing Esteban Ocon to take P10 in the final points position. Albon, kind of a dismal race as well, doesn't really change the position from P7, but yeah, like, stupendous race from us. And I should be more excited, but just out of context, I got my wisdom teeth removed, so it's quite hard for me to go crazy and talk loudly, but yeah, and as I know this race was boring, I do apologize for the boring race, but there was no overtakes really to be had. The only relevant overtake was Verstappen on Ocon, but as you can see through some of this footage, like, I don't know if there was a mistake in the game, like a glitch, because Ocon finishes ahead of Verstappen. Now, I don't know whether or not Verstappen lapped a bunch of people and therefore would have lapped Ocon, but that just seems kind of unlikely because of how far back he was. But as you can see from the opening turn 1, they had a scrap in the first lap, but Ocon took the position. And when Verstappen pit, Ocon stayed out. And despite staying out, I think Ocon pit the lap 4 or something like that, but either way, he still ended up in front of Verstappen. As you can see, as we fast forward through this race, now the replay is going to end right here, and Ocon is still ahead of Verstappen. So I don't know if there was a glitch in the game or not, or something happened. But Giovinazzi, man, he only made up like 1 or 2 positions. Actually, no, he lost a position. So quite an embarrassing race from him, considering that his teammate went on to win his home Grand Prix, which is amazing. However, it doesn't really do much in our standings. We're still P7 in the drivers' standings. That being said, in an Alfa Romeo, P7 is a stupendous result to be had, for sure. But don't expect many races like this, I do have to say. And we still lose position because the Racing Points did so well in this race because of Stroll's P4. And I don't know exactly remember where Sergio Perez is, but I'll leave it here. But anyways, thank you for joining me in this amazing and quite boring race. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below. And, well, I'll see you next time for the French Grand Prix. I'm Isolation Gamer 05. Stay safe out there until next time. Peace out.